Okay, for 6.2, we're going to clear all data from local storage, and in that process, we'll also clear it from in-memory. And also in that process, we're going to learn, also in this section, we're going to learn how to do some things with the UI that is very typical, but can take some setup, and then we're also going to set up for 7. So lots to do. Let's get started. So I have the 6.2 up, and in this case we're going to add this into, you can just copy that, and you can put it at the end of the CSS. Let me show you where that would go. So you can put it right before the right here. Okay, so you can put it right before the media queries. That's what that is, and by now I'm sure we've talked about that. Oh, this is good. I'm looking at this. I haven't done it yet. I had done it to a different version I was working on, so that's good. So I'm going to copy that. Now notice how that formatting is a little off. If this happens to you, like anything, you can always do the document, clean it up, and let that stuff look much better. Okay, so the other thing we're going to need to do is in the index file. So in the index file, we have had this button all along for clearing all saved data, but it's been display none. So we'll just go ahead and actually, I think for now, well, actually we'll just do block. Okay, and just so we can see it. Okay, so now that we have that in here, right? Now I've already, let's just go ahead and click it again. Good. Let me make sure I'm on the right one. Yep. And let me make sure I'm actually on the right. Good. That's what happens when your live server hasn't been restarted. So for me, for this one, I went ahead and now I see the clear all data. Matter of fact, I think I ended up, let me just, because it's good to do this, right? I believe based on the CSS, it's fine to have it just be block. Okay, so now that we have this button, we need to get a reference to this button. We're going to have something loaded to it on init for the event listener, so we can listen for when the user clicks this button. Because remember, what we've been doing is the manual way, and a user, in this case, we're not going to have them do that. We're going to give them functionality to allow them to do that. And you could debate whether this is a good idea. Depends on your particular app need. But in this case, it's just allowing us to learn more. And again, it ventures us into some good areas. Okay. All right. So I didn't actually put, but I showed you how to update this. All right. So now here in the app.js, okay, we're going to add that reference. So let's open our app.js. I'm going to close that. I don't need the style anymore. So in here at the very top, okay, so underneath here, right, I'm going to add a reference to the button itself. So I'm going to say const clear all data button. I can name it again whatever I want, but name it something that makes sense when I read it later. Get element by ID. And this is where you could come over here and look at, and of course it's going to break because I haven't finished writing it. What's the ID? Clear all data button. Makes sense, right? Okay, so now that I have that button with an event listener on there, now I'm going to want to think about, right, how I'm going to clear, because I'm going to need to clear not just what's in local storage, but also what's in memory. So I'm going to be adding, in this case I'm showing you here, we're going to add a function into our storage.js, because this would be where it makes sense. We're doing something with storage, so part of what we need to do is actually clear it out of there. And this is a pretty straightforward function, not a lot going on here. So I'm going to open this to the side so we have both open, and then I'm going to go to the bottom because we are here again going to export const perform clear. Make sure I'm on the right one. Let's actually do it here where it's clear all entries. Okay. Equal function. Okay, so in this case, we are going to export it. It is a method that we will call on the module. There's nothing it needs because everything it needs we already have in here, which is the key, basically the storage key. So all we have to do is call get our local storage dot remove item. So this is the other companion to the get and the set methods that we were using before. And now all we have to do it is local, tell it which key we want to remove. So in this case, we're only removing our associated key. The way I've been doing it, I've been clearing everything. May not always be the best because somebody may need that data for some other reason. So this specifically clears that. And then we'll just add a console log. Okay. All entries cleared from local storage. Now, where we call this then becomes a question. So now that we have this, I'm going to move this over because we're not going to need this for the moment. Then what we're going to do is actually think about where we'd want, because we've set up a listener to a button. So a button would be an event, we would need an event listen to listen for, right? So we're listening for when somebody clicks this button. Okay, so where would we set that up? At this point, we would set that up inside of our init. Okay, so inside of our init, we'd say clear, because we've already have it, we say add event listener. Okay, listen for a click, if I can type it. We're going to say function, there's going to be an event. So now, at this point, we're not going to call the storage yet. We're actually going to call a function inside the app.js that's going to handle this for us, because there are a couple of things we need to be able to do. So we're going to code this function in a minute, but it's going to be called perform clear all data. Okay? So that's what it's going to be called, and now we're going to code it. So when you listen for a click, when it clicks, then call this function. So we come up here, right, and let's put it after the submit, and here, so we'll do const perform all clear data equal to a function. Okay, this function, what are we going to do in here? Okay, so this is where it should handle all the things we need for it to do. But let's go ahead and make sure we have some content, because sometimes I go a little too far. So let's actually do this. This is going to clear from our app, and then it removes the function. Okay, there we go. And then in here, what we'll do, in here, in the app.js, right? So we did the event listener, so we did this, so we'll add some content. So now we'll go add it. We've added the event listener inside of the init, so we're listening for that, and then we've called this. Okay, so here's our new function that we're on. Okay, so here's our new function. All right, so now in here, and actually I think I have one more. Yeah, so let's clear, and this is an interesting way to do it if you think about it, because remember there's what we have in local storage, so this removes that local storage. But what we also need to think about is that carbon footprint entries, right? Because we know that's the in-memory array of objects. So what we're going to do is call length, and we're going to set its length to 0. basically, and this is basically it setting its length to 0 basically clears the array while keeping the const reference, right? Because remember that global reference was to a const, and by doing it here, we're saying remove any data from inside the array, but let's keep the reference because we're going to need that later on. So now we can say storage, right? Reference the module dot clear all entries. Okay, so we know we can now do this. Oh, actually this should have went here. Actually, no, we can do it here. Didn't actually matter. It's more just for notes for us to say. And actually, now that I've said that, I want to put it here, right? And in here, this is actually a console log. I guess I was trying to save myself a little typing so that I say, okay, now give me a console log showing me what's in there, because right now afterwards, so this just kind of confirms for us what this is doing. So now that I've cleared that, right? So again, think about I as the user have clicked this because I have an event listener. I have a reference that then is the event, is attached to the event listener. So now I know that I'm going to clear it from here, but also I'm going to clear it in memory. So what would I want to do after that? Well, I'd actually want to, and this may not be obvious when you think about it, but it makes sense because really what I want to do is I want to re-render the table. And you're like, well, there should be nothing there. Yes, but, right, in this case, here's why we're doing it. We want to actually re-render the table that will show, so that functionality we wrote on the table render, okay, to determine if there's no, if the length is 0 on here, remember this. This then would change our UI to display that, or would update it. And now we're going to go ahead and call our form handler dot clear form, because it's like, okay, now that we've done that, let's actually clear the form, okay? And then results, if there are some setting there, let's go ahead and hide them. So we're just basically saying clean up a little bit. So not only, do this, and we're actually going to see this in action in a minute, so you will actually get to see what happens here. But as we start thinking about the ways we're handling, and let me just see, clear form inputs, that's what this does. Oh, right here, right? That clears and then hides the result section. Now we could choose not to do this, but this is just a way I think UI for a user would make sense. Okay, so let's come back over here. So right now we have, so if this works, unless I have a code in my error, which could happen, right? At this point, when I click here, cool, right? So it cleared there's no more here. There's no more entries in, right? So we have an empty array. That's why they were showing you the in memory, that console.log here. All entries have been cleared from local storage. Now we're inside table render, no thing to display, right? And now we're going to handle this as well, right? Getting rid of this, but for now we at least can see that it's there. And then if we wanted, we could go ahead and calculate another one. It is still there, just to test it again. Good, and so it does what we want it to. But the wonderful thing, no buts about this. The nice thing about JavaScript is not only can we code the logic of our app and what needs to happen, but we can also handle the UI. And what we're going to do next is actually make this a bit more interactive, because you want to ask the user, and sometimes we often see a pop-up that says, are you sure? But we can actually do something nicer for the UI, and we're going to do that next. So let me make sure I got all my stuff. All right, so the only thing I have right now, but I may have more once you're here, is what does in memory mean? We've been talking about this, right? But again, you're using the same chat session, so it understands some of the things we've been talking about in memory, and I should have said versus local storage or persistence, and we have already done some research there. So we've started coding. Oh, wrong one. I'll have to modify that. This is part 1 of clear all data from local storage. So we have that. We've cleared it, but now let's do a little UI work. Okay? I'll see you next.